Hello, and welcome to the Soul Sisters and Seekers podcast. My name is Aruna.
My name's Liz.
I'm Gayathri.
I'm Vidhya.
And we are four friends who aspire to build a community of like minded seekers. So if you're watching this and what we talk about resonates with you, then we urge you to like and subscribe to this podcast. And don't forget, the word unity is in the word community. So we look forward to having you join the conversation. So today we're going to pick up where we left off last week with our discussion on attachment. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Liz with this week's question.
My question is, why do we get attached? My question is, why do we get attached?
I like to look at it this way. When we are born, we are all pretty much the same at the starting point. And then as we get identities, like when I'm given my name or when I identify with my family, then that's the development of ego. And the ego basically gets attached to all these things, your identity, your personality, the things that you own, and so on. So it's not the real you that you're born as, but it's everything that you acquire in this world as you have the human experience. So that's how I see the ego as. And the ego naturally identifies with material things, identifies itself with people, and so on. So the reason that we have attachment is just the natural way that ego identifies itself and it has experiences in this world. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Gayathri or Vidhya.
I think, I agree with you, Aruna. Like you said, one of the three beliefs of ego, as Aaron Apke says in his podcast, first thing is we find ourselves lack something in life, and then we try to get attached to people, things, or any of the practices that you follow to give ourselves identity. And then you also think you are in control of everything, right? These three are the beliefs of ego, and attachment plays a major part in our life. And I also think ego is necessary sometimes, right? Like until we reach a certain age, because ego also motivates us to do some things in life. If we don't have ego, if you think about the other side, maybe we wouldn't achieve anything, right? To create that identity, we all struggle to develop something in our life. So
you can't function in the real world, right?
Yes, you can't function in the real world. But I think when you are questioning yourself, when you are in the spiritual path, trying to find who you are really, then I think we can work on ways to, let go of ego. Though I really don't think, for me also, it's not possible. It's not simple or easy. But if we can achieve that, it'll be great.
I think to be human is to have an ego. We cannot have a human experience without an ego. And I think the word ego gets a bad rep because we think of ego as something negative, but all it is a collection of past experiences, social structures, family structures, all that put together creates an individual ego. Now, to experience life, we need those things. We need an ego. But to say that if you have an ego, you have attachment, I'm not sure that that goes hand in hand. I think you can have a healthy ego without attachment. I think to me, attachment is something fear-based. And then coming full circle to what Vidya said then, to think that you're lacking something or to think you have some sort of need, those are, I think, what creates attachment. Then you attach yourself to people, to situations, to stories, to so many things, right? Even spirituality is could be an attachment. So to me, I'm not sure. I don't believe that ego necessarily necessitates attachment. I do think you need an ego, a healthy ego, but attachment, I think, is fear-based.
Mhm. I definitely agree with you. I don't think it has to go hand in hand, because I think when you look at the masters that operate in this world, right, they have an identity by which they are known. So they have a personality, but they're not necessarily attached, and they're well beyond or well ahead in on the spiritual journey compared to myself, for instance, right? Without an ego, it's hard to function. But you can, as Gayatri mentioned, I think they are two separate things. But at the same time, I think when you are attached and you're not able to pull away from the attachment, then I do believe that that is the ego that's stopping you from getting unattached.
I think we can, if we could dive a little bit deeper into what an ego is, I think
Mhm.
a healthy ego would be an ego that goes with the flow. There's no attachment to the ego itself. It's as if things arise and fall away and arise and fall away. But when we create a story around our ego, I am this, I am that, this is my achievement, this is my family, that becomes a very static ego. And I think that's where the ego has a negative connotation.
Mhm.
But I think ego in itself is meant to be transitionary, even second by second, minute by minute, whatever situation we're in. So if we have a solid ego, if we are afraid of saying, if we say this is my achievement, and these are things I'm defined by, and if that's a static thing, then that in itself is fear-based, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's not loose, it's very solid.
Wasn't the ego an evolutionary development, part of the human consciousness for safety? And we have that fear attached to the ego because it's trying to keep us safe in a safe environment. And how does that
You're talking about fight or flight,
negatively,
like which is our
fight or
instinct.
flight? Oh, yeah, like
But there's
Mhm.
no ego involved there, right? That's a very learned behavior, passed from generation to generation, fight or flight.
I understood the ego as is something that inside yourself that keeps you safe and keeps telling you, keeps attaches to these stories, attaches to people, attaches to things that not are necessarily good for us.
I think ego needs more like external validity, if you all would
Okay.
agree, because you always try to identify yourself with something, and how you show up in front of other people. For example, what others will think of me. If you really think that's what we think about, it worries us so much in our day-to-day lives. Like, how will I be judged? You're always worrying about other people's views and opinions on you, which is what I think ego does to you. Actually,
Okay.
if you're just sitting by yourself, you're in a park where there is nobody around you, how would you treat yourself? I think that's where there is no ego. But the moment somebody walks in, then ego kind of like comes in to your mind. That's how I see it. Like, you immediately start thinking, oh, am I looking good? What will the other person think about? That's just something first comes to your mind.
So going back to the question, why do we get attached? So basically, the ego is all about comparing your own identity with others, and it happens very subconsciously, right? We don't do it very actively, but we're always looking at, oh, what our neighbors are doing, what other people are doing. We're influenced by media and so on. So sometimes we get attached to things, and subconsciously we hold on to things because we feel that without it, the ego will suffer, right? Like our identity will suffer. Okay, people know me as this is my job, and people know me as, say, a marketing manager. Now, if I don't have a job, and it's like, okay, well, then how do I look? And, and that attachment to that particular position, attachment to that particular salary, then I'm not any longer attached to the identity as that particular person. Where the spiritual journey tells me I should love myself at the core without kind of attaching myself to the identity of anything external, right? So, but it's that fear of not being seen in a good light by other people, and even myself, right? Within ourselves, we fear what other people, how other people will judge us, and we're attached to certain things.
So if we're attached to those things, why is detaching from those things important to our spiritual growth? Why is detachment important?
I think it affects us at an emotional level. That's what I think. And attachment is not something wrong. Like I think, Liz, you mentioned before, attachment creates a sense of security, right? You just think about attachment towards family. It gives you peace of mind to a certain extent. And that is not wrong. But I think when we are in the spiritual path, their attachment comes with some expectations also. That's where I think it impacts our spiritual growth, because things don't go a certain way because of our attachment towards it. Our mind gets affected. That's
I know, yeah. For me, because I've suffered losses that I've had to detach in order to free myself from these attachments that I had. And detachment was the only way, and just transcending that and dissolving that into something new, and that you get a sense of freedom when you detach yourself from your story, from your the relationships that no longer work, from a job that no longer brings you joy. So I think that detachment moving forward in your spiritual journey is a very important process.
Yeah, as Gayathri mentioned, right? It's just kind of going with the flow. And when you go with the flow and you accept whatever you get, whether it's positive or negative, instead of going, there's a picture kind of comes to my mind where there's basically floating down the river, right? And most people float to the one bank and then they float to the other bank. So it's like good things are happening on the one bank, bad things happen on the other bank. So you're kind of zigzagging down the river. But really what we want to do is ideally go down the middle of the river. Good things will happen, bad things will happen, but how we handle those things is what I think spirituality gives us the strength to do, right? Knowing that it's going to be up and it's going to be down, but then not having the attachment to either, and not saying, I only want good things or I don't want bad things. That shift in perspective, I think, is the key to living a spiritual life.
So I think one thing we should consider is the word detachment. To me personally, detachment is as strong a hold as attachment. Because we said, I think we all kind of agreed that attachment comes, Vidhya, I liked your example about attachment to family, and we all have that because it does give us a sense of comfort. Now, what is detachment? Why is it that we wouldn't be able to, or we would find it hard to detach from the family? That too is fear-based.
Yeah.
So to me, attachment and detachment are the same thing, because at the core, it's the same trigger, same emotion.
I agree with you, Gayatri. Yeah, like attachment and detachment goes hand in hand,
Yeah.
I think. I'm just trying to think about a family example, right? Like if you're attached to someone in your family, leave the immediate family, right? Like, just think of somebody who you are attached to. Then you have expectations. And if it doesn't get fulfilled, you go through negative emotions that
Yes.
impacts your growth, right? So the way you can think of is whatever experiences come through that person, just accept it the same way always, be it positive or negative. Just accept the person as they are, and I think it helps.
So-
Lately I've been following that, and it's been helping me. The people who I would usually think they are very close to me, if you have that sense of detachment, I wouldn't call it like totally detaching from people, but thinking in your mind, I'm going to accept this person's all kinds of behavior. I think it helps.
Then wouldn't you say, instead of detaching, that we would ease up on the expectations we have on the person? Because
Yeah,
then
I
that
think-
would let us ride the wave. If we have no
Yeah, I think
expectations.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Liz.
acceptance is
Acceptance. Yeah.
a really good word that you use there, to accept what we have in life and accept the positive and the negative, but then try and neutralize it.
Mhm.
So it's the same effect each time, that you're not triggered by the positive, you're not triggered by the negative, you just have this strength about you and
But it's
resolve.
But it's okay to be triggered, right? Why do we
Yes.
run away from trigger? It's okay to feel hurt. It's okay to feel disappointed, anger, on the so-called negative end of the spectrum.
Mm.
And on the positive, of course, is love and affection and all that stuff. But why is it wrong to feel all these things? It's okay, right?
As humans, it's necessary, I think.
Yeah, it gives us the whole
Mhm.
spectrum
Different kind of experience.
experience. But if we can sit in a place where all this is okay, then even expectation goes out the window, because we know then we can handle it.
Yeah. You don't become a robot, I think, just because you're spiritual. I mean, Yogananda is a great example. Was when his guru passed away, he was stricken with grief, but he was a spiritual master, right? Because there's of course love. That doesn't mean, it wasn't a fear-based thing. There was just such pure love and as you mentioned, there's an attachment, right? He obviously loved his guru very much. Doesn't make you attached to ego just because you have these feelings, which are just part of us being here.
I also learned three types of ego when I was reading a book. If you've heard about the three types of gunas, the tamasic, rajasvik, and sattvic, right?
Mhm.
Tamasvik is someone who you can think of as being very lazy. So they say, means don't want to do anything, no motivation to do anything in life. So they say that kind of ego is self-destructive. And also the opposite of tamasic is rajasvik, one who's very, very self-centered. So that also leads to self-destruction. Person who doesn't think about anybody else except himself, right? And then the last one I read is sattvic. So they are saying in spirituality, you can have sattvic type of ego. Sattvic is a person who doesn't expect much, who's just okay, and who aims to work on servicing for others, less thinking about himself and more thinking about what the world needs, always thinking of servicing in mind. Because even to do servicing or volunteering, you need some kind of ego. So in spirituality, it is said having that type of ego helps you. But even then, as you progress in spirituality, they say you should give up on that. But it's a good starting point, I think, for all of us to look into that.
Great. Thank you very much. It was a very lively discussion, and we look forward to talking a little bit more on this subject and other things. So with that, I think we can wrap things up. If you like this podcast, we urge you to like and subscribe and stay in touch. And please do communicate with us in the comments below. So with that, I bid everyone a very wonderful day. Namaste, everyone.
Namaste.